We're back here, hour number 2 of Talk with a Purpose on WPG Talk Radio 1450. I'm your host, John DeMasi. Good to have you with us. A lively first hour. We talked about scary movies and scary TV shows, and we gave out gift certificates and trivia questions and blah, 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 blah. It was good. It was fun. I enjoyed it. Now, we had some sort of a technical issue. Brian Regal just called me on my cell phone. Is he in? Is he calling? Okay, Chris, we got that. All right, so we're going to get him. You got him on hold? Okay, he's on hold. But let's talk to Catherine first. We promised her that we would talk to her, and then we'll talk to Brian. So, Brian, he can hear this on hold. By the way, you can go to our website, WPG1450.com. Chris just informed me during the break, there's a video of someone supposedly, keyword, supposedly saw the Jersey Devil in where? Leeds Point, Chris? 3 weeks ago? Excuse me to my lawyer friends. That wasn't the Jersey Devil. That was a lawyer. Oh, I'm sorry. Do we have Catherine on the line?
Yes.
Hi, Catherine. Yeah, listen, I had to tell a lawyer joke. Come on.
That was good. I agree with that so wholeheartedly.
You know what? I have lawyers here on the show, and I have friends who are lawyers, but so what? You know, I mean, it's always good to...
Oh, I have a couple of friends that are lawyers, too. And
yeah.
Well, there's an old joke, you know, what's 5,000 lawyers at the end of on the bottom of the sea? And it's a good start.
That's a good one. Okay, Catherine, welcome to the show. We wanted to get you on because you were on hold from the last hour. You have any scary movies or stories or anything you want to share with us?
Well, me and my boyfriend had gotten a trailer and tuckered in, and I had a coffin pocketbook that was up on our mantle. And on Palm Sunday, we had heard things in the house, in the trailer, and we just kind of blew it off. And then finally, my boyfriend had gotten hit in the head with a hammer.
Oh, boy.
Things had started to move around the house. Our grate had actually lifted up out of the floor and flew across the room, scared the heck out of us. But the coffin, we had put it on top of the mantle, and I was standing in the living room, and Al was sitting in his chair, and it just lifted up and smashed against the wall. They didn't, I guess, appreciate having a coffin pocketbook on their mantle.
Probably not. Probably not, no.
But it was scary, and, you know, we no longer live there. But it was a very strange experience having that happen in our house. Well,
that is weird. And well, anything else ever happen or anything come out of that or anything? No. We left the trailer and that was it. You know, I had things happen to me when I was younger. But you know, my mom was always thinking that we were pretty much, good with intuition and stuff like that. And I always said, well, yeah, I think that grandma goes around. So. Well, Catherine, we appreciate your input. Thanks for staying on hold, and thanks a lot for the call. Appreciate it. Okay, Talk with a Purpose here, WPG Talk Radio 1450. We mentioned this. We've got him on hold. We're going to put him on. A little background. Brian Regal. Again, he is assistant professor of the history of science at Kean University in New Jersey. He's written 5 books on the Jersey Devil, 3 papers. He is also, and unfortunately this was on last night on the History Channel. He's been on this show. I believe he was on last night, and we'll clarify that, but a show called True Monsters. And listen, we got the best expert in the state on this. The Jersey Devil. Brian, thanks for coming on. We really have really a pleasure having you on the show.
Thanks. Well, thanks for having me on.
Appreciate
and I haven't written 6 books on the Jersey Devil. I've written 6 books None of them on the Jersey Devil.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, but
I've written several articles on the Jersey Devil.
Okay.
But a colleague of mine here at Kane, Frank Esposito, we've just finished a manuscript for a book on the Jersey Devil, and hopefully that'll be out sometime soon.
But you've written 5 books.
Yes.
Okay. And you have 3 papers.
Well, 2 on the Jersey Devil
Okay.
and about a half a dozen on other topics.
Well, you are, I guess, the premier expert in the state on the Jersey Devil.
Suppose.
Yeah. So I'm reading this. I mean, and I started the show in the first hour, and I said, I don't know about you, meaning the audience, if you believe in these kind of things. And then there's a picture in the Wikipedia of what the Jersey Devil supposedly looks like, and
Right.
I called it a kangaroo with a horse's head and bat wings.
Sure,
Is that?
I always humorously say, imagine if Pegasus went over to the dark side.
Okay.
That's what it looks like.
Yeah. And by the way, on our website, which I didn't know about, WPG1450.com, there's a video, and supposedly the Jersey Devil was seen 3 weeks ago. Where? In the Pine Barrens, Chris? Yeah, supposedly 3 weeks ago in the Pine Barrens.
Right.
Now, what happens to this? Do you get these sightings, or do people call you or text you or email you and say, hey, I saw it, and do you verify it? Explain that.
Well, no one has ever called me and told me they've seen the Jersey Devil, but I have colleagues and friends who, when they see stories, they'll write to me and say, did you see this latest thing? So, yeah, I have seen that footage and was not particularly impressed by it. It looks like someone took a model horse with wings on it, threw it up in the air, and then photographed it while it was falling.
Right. Yeah, that's what we were looking at it during the break, and that's what we kind of surmised, that it looked like, and all you do is see it fly up and come down, and it comes down behind trees. So obviously whoever did it had the controls, and then they put it high up enough to take a picture, and then it went down behind trees where they could hide it and then dismantle it. So
right, that sounds about right.
Yeah. So, but tell me about this Jersey Devil legend. It goes back to when? The 1700s?
Well, it all depends. What most people don't realize is there's 2 stories here. There's 2 devils.
Okay.
There's the Leeds Devil, and then there's the Jersey Devil.
Okay.
The Leeds Devil is a legend that comes out of colonial America, sort of loosely based on the Leeds family, which is a real family. Of all the elements of the traditional Jersey Devil legend, the mention of the Leeds family is really the only part that has any kind of historical validity. You often hear about Mother Leeds, and you often hear about Daniel Leeds. There was no Mother Leeds, at least not that we could ever find, but there was a Daniel Leeds, and he is often portrayed in these myths as this kind of drunken country bumpkin, running around the Pine Barren, deep in the Pine Barrens, getting up to who knows what, usually some sort of supernatural occult-related shenanigans, and basically makes the Leeds family look very bad. The reality is far different. Daniel Leeds was an early colonist in America. He comes over to what is then West Jersey from England when he's about 25 years old. He's erudite, he's educated, he is interested in science and astrology and theology on a fairly high level, and he comes to New Jersey along with his family to make a life for themselves. They're Quakers, and they feel that if they come here, they'll have a place where they can follow their religion and live their lives in a way that basically in freedom. And when he gets here, he decides that what he wants to do is bring the scientific revolution to America. And he starts publishing an almanac. He publishes a series of books, and he gets creamed for it by his Quaker neighbors. He gets the exact opposite reaction he had hoped for. And eventually the Quakers begin referring to him as being evil, even as being Satan's harbinger. And that's where the Leeds Devil legend begins to grow.
Is this because that when Mother Leeds had her 13th child, they said it was a stormy night, supposedly, according to legend, and friends were around, and they said that the Mother Leeds was a witch, and the child's father was the devil himself?
Right. Yeah, the thing to keep in mind about that whole story is it's a myth.
Yes.
It's fake.
Yes.
Dr. Esposito and I, when we were working on this book, we took great pains to try to track down all of these little bits and pieces. And while Daniel Leeds did have several wives, including one named Jane, we could find no historical references to any of these people being referred to as Mother Leeds. And this whole idea of giving birth in a kind of rundown hovel in the middle of the Pine Barrens, there's just no evidence for it. The Leeds family by this time are fairly well off, in very nice conditions, in very nice houses in Burlington and in Leeds Point. And so this whole notion that they're these kind of poor wretches is really just a slander upon the Leeds family.
So this whole thing sounds like, from the very beginning, it's a myth. Then you say, according to you, that the references don't appear in newspapers until the 20th century, until 1909.
Right. Well, what happens is following the Revolution, because Daniel Leeds had been fairly politically connected and politically active, and he supported the infamous Lord Cornbury, who was the first royal governor of New Jersey. And so he sort of is on the outs, and this kind of view of him as being pro the empire and anti-colonist springs up, and that's where the whole idea of the Leeds Devil. The Leeds Devil is more of a political animal than a monster. But by the middle of the 19th century, that legend has gone all but extinct. Very few people remember it, and so the idea of the Jersey Devil doesn't appear till the 20th century. Because in 1909, actually it begins in 1905, but in 1909, a series of incidents occur where people find strange footprints in the snow. And they can't figure out what could have caused these strange footprints.
Well, I understand that the creature attacked the trolley car. Is that right?
Well, there's a number of stories like that. There's one where it supposedly attacked a train and went after the conductor. But up to this point, it's still being referred to as the Leeds Devil.
Okay.
Because the political background has been forgotten, and now people have sort of conflated it with Native American stories about forest dragons. And there is what they used to call a dime museum in Philadelphia, the 9th and Arch Street Dime Museum.
Okay.
And they're looking for a publicity angle. And they hear about these stories, and they think this would make a great thing to get people into the museum. So they start spreading stories about the Leeds Devil being a monster, even to the point of putting on a fake monster hunt so that people would think it was real. And then they went and they acquired from Albany, New York, of all places, there's a guy up there who rents exotic animals. And for some reason, he has a kangaroo. And so they rent the kangaroo, bring it down to Philadelphia, paint it up, put fake wings on it, and start displaying it as the Leeds Devil. But then the guys who run the museum say, Leeds Devil, the name Leeds Devil doesn't quite sing. And that's when they come up with the term Jersey Devil. Okay,
so that's where it came from. Now, I'm going to ask you, according to reported encounters, we're into the 20th century now, but in the 19th century, Napoleon's brother Joseph witnessed the Jersey Devil around 1820. Is that true?
No.
Okay. And then, wait a minute. In 1840,
Stephen Decatur.
Okay. In 1840, the devil was blamed for killing livestock. Is that true?
No.
Okay, so far what you're saying,
and all those stories, the Stephen Decatur story, the Joseph Bonaparte story, these are all apocryphal. They don't come out until the 20th century. People start saying, back in the 19th century, Joseph Bonaparte saw this thing, and Stephen Decatur fired cannonballs at it. None of this appears until the 20th century.
So, but then supposedly that there was a lot of reports in 1909. Is that from people just panicking and saying, "Oh yeah, I saw that"?
Yeah, well, I'm a historian. I'm not a psychologist.
Okay.
But yeah, what happens is after a few weeks of displaying this Jersey Devil at the 9th and Arch Street Dime Museum, people finally begin to realize, this is probably fake, and they take the poor kangaroo and they wash it off. They send it back to Albany. God knows what happened to it after that.
Right.
It gets exposed as a hoax. But we know now. Watch anything on TV. Watch the presidential debates. Watch anything sort of political on TV today, and you see where people just make stuff up.
Right.
And in order to gain some sort of political advantage or make a rival look bad, and people start to believe it, regardless of the fact that it's fake. And if the person who is on the receiving end of this comes out and says, well, that's not the case at all, nobody believes it. Nobody cares. They like the myth. They don't like the reality.
It's interesting. You're talking about this. I also read that the Philadelphia Zoo in 1909, because of all of the commotion about this, first of all, there were supposed sightings. You know this, but I'm just telling the audience. Mm-hmm. Supposed sightings in South Jersey, Delaware, Western Maryland, Bristol, Pennsylvania, Camden, New Jersey, and then the Philadelphia Zoo, this is funny, posted a $10,000, now this is 1909, $10,000, that's like $1 million today, $10,000 reward for the creature's feces.
Just that?
Yeah, that's what I read.
Right.
Were you aware of that?
No, we basically... In our research, we discounted anything that happens after about 1920.
Okay.
Because we felt we had established that this whole thing is a myth. So anything after that is just people either intentionally hoaxing or more likely misidentifying genuine animals or events.
Yeah. And by the way, the report of this, when the Philadelphia Zoo, somebody said it was a kangaroo with artificial wings.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So you were right.
It's eventually found out.
Right. Exactly. Brian, will you take calls if our audience calls in and has questions? Okay, sure. We're coming up on a break, so we'll put you on hold. Stay with us. Brian Regal is our guest. He is probably the premier expert in the state on the Jersey Devil. And so far, what he's telling us, I started the show by saying I don't believe in ghosts, goblins, ghouls. I don't believe in paranormal activity. I don't believe in creatures from outer space. I don't believe in any of this. We had some of your stories in the first hour. We heard some really good, fun stories of things that scared you. But some things can scare you, but is it ghosts or is it the Jersey Devil? And that's what we're talking to Brian about. If you have a question for Brian specifically about the Jersey Devil, well, this is your time to give him a call, 609-407-1450. It's Talk with a Purpose. I'm your host, John DeMasi. More show after these words. Back here on Talk with a Purpose, I always like to give out my personal email at each break, so if you'd like to email me, if you have a comment on today's show, feel free. You want to talk about a potential topic for a future show, feel free. JDAD, V as in Victor, the number 1, at Comcast.net. JDADV as in Victor, the number 1, at Comcast.net. It is Talk with a Purpose, Saturdays 9 till 11 here on WPG Talk Radio 1450, 609-407-1450. If you have a question for our guest, Brian Regal, as I said earlier, I do believe he is the premier expert in New Jersey about the Jersey Devil. Before we bring Brian back, I want to mention his books. And forgive me, I thought these were books about the Jersey Devil, but these are Brian's books, and we will mention them. And I'm sure you can get them at any fine bookstore or on Amazon.com. His publications include Searching for Sasquatch, Crackpots, Eggheads, and Cryptozoology. I love that title. Pseudoscience, A Critical Encyclopedia. Icons of Evolution. Human Evolution, A Guide to the Debates. And Henry Fairfield Osborne, Race and the Search for the Origins of Man. Those are his books. And as I said, Brian is an American historian of science. He is assistant professor of the history of science at King University in New Jersey. And we are happy to have him here on the show this morning. We got him out of a class. So, Brian, thanks for doing this. We really,
my pleasure.
Really appreciate it. So far, so far what you're saying, and you told me when we talked during the week, you said your listeners, if they believe, they're probably not going to be too happy.
Right.
This whole thing, and Brian, it's gone on for several hundred years, and there doesn't seem to be any real meat to this thing.
No, there really isn't. Certainly not the monster story. What the other thing I would hope people would take away from this is that the Jersey Devil legend is not a monster story. It's a political story. It is about the origins of the state of New Jersey. It's about the origins of the United States in general. Daniel Leeds is the first author in New Jersey. He's the first censored author in New Jersey because his Quaker neighbors dislike his work so much they destroy it rather than allow it to be published. He is trying to bring a kind of intellectual view of the universe to West Jersey. He's the first person south of Boston to publicly support the Copernican heliocentric view of the universe, that is, that the Earth goes around the sun, which was something which was not widely yet accepted in many places. So he's a pioneer in a number of ways.
All right. Now, I'm in doing the research, it seems like, and again, TV stations, newspapers, internet reporters, they got to write stuff. So, when there's this kind of stuff, they say, "Oh, people are going to click on our website," or like this thing on our website. I mean, it's clearly not the real thing. And check it out, Brian, when you get off the air with us. But there was a story that the Philadelphia Bulletin sent a reporter to Downingtown, Pennsylvania, because there was an unknown animal with red eyes. And that was...
They always had red eyes. I have never seen an unknown animal that didn't have red eyes.
Yeah, well, and then I'm reading that in 1951, Gibbstown, New Jersey, kids they saw a monster matching the devil's description. Well, what is the devil's description? I mean, I don't get this. So do you ever look into these things in your research? You said that pretty much after 1925, but I'm reading here 1937, 1951, 1960, tracks and noises near Mays Landing. I mean, is there any... Where does this come from, and do people really look into this, or is it just somebody said, "Oh, I saw that"?
Well, I can't really tell you. Again, I don't have the training to psychologically deconstruct why people say they see the Jersey Devil. I think what happens is these legends get kind of into the public mind, and especially if you live in an area where things supposedly go on, no one ever says they see the Jersey Devil in Alaska.
Right. He doesn't travel well, right?
It's always in the middle of the Atlantic states. There's actually, and a lot of people don't know this, there's actually a legend of a creature in Maryland, sort of loosely associated with the Jersey Devil, that fits the kind of same morphology, but it's called a snallygaster, which is kind of the Jersey Devil's poor cousin down there in Maryland. In Africa, starting in the 1990s, in West Africa, there are reports of a creature called an opobawa, which also the physical description is very similar to the Jersey Devil, although the opobawa is far more violent than the Jersey Devil has ever been. So this idea of monsters running around is really, it breaks all cultural bounds. It's everywhere. People always have monsters where they live because we human beings are the biggest scaredy cats in the universe. Well,
that's true. That's why it's a multi-million-dollar industry, these scary movies.
Yeah, and it's also more difficult. It's easier for a TV show or a radio show or a newspaper to say there's a monster running around in the woods called the Jersey Devil than to sit there and try to explain the reality.
Well, sure, that gets ratings.
Right. And even though Even though I think the reality of the Jersey Devil story is far more interesting and exciting and dramatic.
Sure.
I mean, we haven't mentioned Titan Leeds, who was Daniel Leeds' son, who takes over for him. But you can, and it's Titan Leeds who sort of runs into Ben Franklin, and Franklin starts referring to Titan Leeds as a ghost, which also contributes to the whole Leeds Devil legend. But this is a father. In one way, it's a father-son story of almost Shakespearean proportions. You know, Daniel Leeds is like a tragic character,
and the son carries it on,
right?
And then, of course, Ben Franklin, one of the famous Americans, the most famous Americans, he seems to run with it,
right?
Because I guess it's like today. It's kind of a political football.
Right, and it was also about ratings.
Sure.
The Leeds Almanac was the premier almanac in the Middle Atlantic states. And everybody read almanacs. They were sort of the magazines. They were the TV guide of the day. You could even see them as a kind of a blog or even a Twitter analogy of the time. And when Franklin shows up, he wants to make this is way before he becomes a politician and becomes famous as a founding father. He wants to make money as a printer, and the easiest way to do that was to start cranking out an almanac.
Sure.
Because they were cheap to produce, everybody read them, and so he begins to engage in this almanac feud as a way of pumping up publicity for Poor Richard's Almanac, and it works. In the end, the Leeds Almanac goes extinct. Nobody remembers it today, except for scholars and genealogists. And if you ask the average person on the street, what's the most famous almanac in American history, they'll say Poor Richard's Almanac by Ben Franklin.
Yes, that's right. That's right. So he did a good job. He was a good marketer back then.
Yeah, you gotta give it to him. He destroyed the competition just by making up some stuff about ghosts and spirits.
You know, it's interesting. You read this stuff. In 1740, a clergyman exorcised the demon for 100 years, and it wasn't seen again until 1890. So we got 150 years out of that exorcism.
Well, yeah, that's another famous story. There's obviously all sorts of problems with that. First off, there's no textual evidence of that ever happening. And secondly, the Quakers didn't do exorcisms. So I'm not sure who was running around doing this. Maybe an Anglican.
I'm glad we got you on, Brian, because you've dispelled everything this morning here on the show.
It's all fun and games until the historian shows up.
Right, exactly. So I mean, bottom line, none of this. I mean, I'm seeing here that in 1960, you're going to love this one. Merchants around Camden, New Jersey offer a $10,000 reward for the capture of the Jersey Devil. And they offered to build a private zoo to house the creature. If captured.
It's a publicity stunt.
Obviously, nobody caught him because he doesn't exist.
Right.
Or whatever it is doesn't exist.
But, there are people who are probably listening to this right now thinking, this damn guy, he doesn't know what he's talking about. I've seen the Jersey Devil. I've given talks about this over the last couple of years. And almost always when the talk is over and people are sort of milling out and coming up and saying, thank you for coming and that sort of thing, there's always someone who'll come up and say, yeah, I know, but I saw this thing in my backyard. And what do I say to that?
Right, exactly. Did you ask him for a picture?
You saw it.
Give me a picture.
Yeah.
Well, no, I don't have one of those. But your papers now, these you said you wrote 3 papers. Now, are these about the Jersey Devil, Brian?
Yeah, there's one that came out 2 years ago in Skeptical Inquirer, in the magazine called Skeptical Inquirer. That's kind of a popularized version of what we're talking about. And then there's the peer review version that just came out over the summer in the journal. Now the name just flew right out of my head. The Journal of New Jersey Studies.
Yes. Okay.
And if people want to read those, they're on my website. You can download them for free as a PDF.
Okay. What is your website, Brian?
If they just Google my name, they'll get my Kean University website.
Yes. Okay. It's Brian Regal, Regal. Brian with an I, Regal.
Right, yes, Brian.
Okay. Well, we're coming up on a break shortly. I want to talk about your TV show.
Okay.
Because I'm going to do a show one day on TV, and there's a lot of stuff on TV. Unfortunately, Not a lot of it is good, but your show is very interesting. And again, this is kind of in this genre of what we're talking about today on the show. But I want to talk about that. We'll do a little bit on the TV show, but we're coming up on a break. If you have a question for Brian, if you've seen the Jersey Devil, we certainly want to hear from them, don't we, Brian?
Well, again, I never know what to say to people when they say they've seen it.
Well, listen, we'll play it by ear. This is live radio, so we'll see where it takes us.
Okay.
609-407-1450 is our number here. We're talking to Brian Regal. He is an assistant professor of the history of science at Kean University in New Jersey, one of the premier experts in the state on the Jersey Devil. We're talking about that, and Brian has pretty much told us that this is just myth and conjecture and all of that stuff. So if you've seen the Jersey Devil, we certainly want to hear from you. If you have any kind of a story you want to share, or if you have a question for Brian, 609-407-1450. We're going to talk about his TV show after the break. I'm your host, John DeMasi. Talk with a Purpose. WPG Talk Radio 1450, Saturdays 9 till 11. Back with more show after these words. All right, back here on Talk with a Purpose. I'm your host, John DeMasi. My personal email, you want to get in touch with me, JDADV as in Victor, the number 1 at Comcast.net, JDADV1 at Comcast.net. I've heard from a lot of folks who listen to the show. Nice to hear from you. And if you want to comment, whether you think it's positive or negative, hey, feel free. That's what we're here for, to take all comments, all suggestions, etc., etc. 609-407-1450 is our number here in the studio. Our guest today, Brian Regal. Brian, the assistant professor of the history of science at Kean University in New Jersey. He is probably, I would say not probably, definitely one of the premier experts in the state on the Jersey Devil. That's what we're talking about here today on the show, the Jersey Devil. And Brian has pretty much told us this is all nice and all that wonderful stuff. It creates sales for newspapers, magazines, ratings for TV shows, TV news, whatever, and maybe even this show. Who knows? But we're happy to have him with us. Brian, before we get into your TV show, now they Google you, Brian Regal, Brian with an I, Regal. They get your website, and then is there a list of your papers and where they can get some of your publications?
Yeah, if they go to along the top of the website, there'll be a button that says Select Publications.
Okay.
And if they click on that and then just scroll down, there's a bunch of my work there that people can download for free. They're all PDFs. And there's one, The Jersey Devil, a Political Animal, that's in New Jersey Studies, that just came out over the summer. And then the other one, The Jersey Devil, The Real Story, is in Skeptical Inquirer from a couple of years ago, but you can also download a PDF of it. Okay,
sounds good. And we certainly will do that. We encourage people to do that, to find out a little more, especially if you're sitting around, and you're talking about scary stories. It's a good one to tell. I mean, it makes for fun, but you've done a good job of dispelling this myth. I never believed in it personally. I've never believed in these kind of things. And that's how I started this show, by saying, do you believe, meaning our audience, and people have said they've had experiences. But I never thought there was such a thing as a Jersey Devil. I worked with a guy in radio years ago, and he swore by it. And no, but thanks. All right, your TV show is True Monsters on the History Channel.
Yes.
What is this about?
Well, it's a documentary about looking at monster stories and trying to find the historical background to them.
Okay. And certainly, you've got a lot on the Jersey Devil.
Yeah, the first episode, the first show was about the first half of the first show was on the Jersey Devil.
Okay.
And then they're all over the place with other ones: Cyclops, pumpkin heads, Greek mythology. And there's a number of people who talk about the different myths and legends, and I'm in there. I'm in all 4 episodes.
And this is on the History Channel. When is it on, Brian?
Friday nights at 10. They just showed the 4th episode, which is either just the last one in the first series or it's the last one they made.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
And
it
then
may just be 4 episodes, or the 4 episodes that they've shown may just be the first 4 episodes. I'm not sure.
And I'm sure you can get it on demand if you missed it. I
think it's on Hulu.
Okay, sure, okay.
And they replay it, a number of times.
Did you ever think you'd get on television with this stuff?
No, I never did.
Well, you're on radio today. You're on television. I mean, the next thing you know, you may be on the Tonight Show. You never know, Brian.
Well, the funny thing is, I've written all this very serious work and got very little attention for it outside of the scholarly community until around 2009, which was the anniversary of the publication of Charles Darwin's On the Origin of Species.
Yes.
And I wrote a short article. I mean, not an article, but I gave a paper at a meeting of the British Society for the History of Science discussing Darwin and his effect on belief in werewolves, and how natural selection sort of discounts the idea of werewolves because you can't mate humans and canines. And it was sort of semi-serious, semi-humorous. And for some reason, USA Today picked up on it. And suddenly, now I'm all over the place. And it can be a little frustrating when your serious work gets largely ignored. But the minute you mention werewolves, I'm all over the media.
I wanted to ask you, is this your paper, Amateur versus Professional, The Search for Bigfoot?
Yes.
Okay. So, listen, while you dispelled the Jersey Devil, let's ask you about Bigfoot. Is there a Bigfoot?
I don't think there is.
Okay.
I would like to think there is, but I don't think there is.
Okay. Listen, let's get rid of them all, right, Brian?
Sure. Well, ruin all the romance out of life.
Brian, I've really, and I know our audience has enjoyed this too. I've really enjoyed your time, and we will certainly be in touch. We are making a copy of this show, and we will forward it to you. And again, we appreciate it, and feel free to tell folks that you were on this show and on this station. And anything I can do to certainly promote you on other shows, feel free to contact me.
Okay.
Really appreciate your time.
Well, thanks for having me on.
Thanks a lot. Brian Regal, Assistant Professor of the History of Science at Kean University.